Hey,
How
hello?
are you doing?
Can you hear me? How's
I
it
do.
going?
How are
Doing
you?
good.
I don't see your Beeple on your sofa.
The Beeples, oh, they're right here. They're just up a little further.
There are two.
Oh, there's a bunch of them. So now we just noticed that people are starting to buy them. People recognize that they're worth more than $20 on eBay. So now they're like 200 or like $1,000 to get those. And they were never like that. But now people like enough
Wow.
people understand why they might have more value than that, and so they're
That,
um
that's probably because of you.
yeah, no, I'm sure it's definitely, I've been buying them for 15 years. They've
Oh,
never been more than $20, and now suddenly they're $1,000 on eBay.
aha.
Yeah,
Well, so how are you? How have you been all this? There's a trip to Hawaii and many things.
yeah, good. It was definitely, we finished the spring collection a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago, and now we're making the actual sort of like, we have to make uh, like 500 of these boxes with the like lights and everything. So, oh, this doesn't have the like screen in it. So we have to make a buttload of these boxes and ship them. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the sort of like next phase is making a bunch of these. We have to make 500 of these boxes that have all the like lights and all this like, sort of crazy crap, and they're all different, like a bunch of different versions of this. Some are made out of like some have like wood inlays, some of them have like 24 karat gold.
I
Like,
saw that on the internet.
what's up?
The gold
Yeah,
one.
the like bowl
Someone.
one. So we've got to make a bunch of these. We've got to make 500 of those boxes in like the next month roughly.
So, uh, how do you feel about that? About making physical objects?
I like it a lot. I like it a lot. It's definitely very fun, and it's been super inspiring because it's just so new, but there's so many possibilities. And I feel like I don't really see many artists using screens as a medium. Um, I think obviously like Nam June Pak or whatever was doing it, 30 years ago or whatever, but obviously screen technology has and electronics have increased quite a bit since then. And so there's maybe worth another second look at what could be done with screens, especially with rendering technology and what has sort of like progressed with there. And just manufacturing technology in general now is so crazy with like 3D printing, and like you're able to like, especially because I work in 3D. So it's not like, oh, I got to sketch something out and then hand it to another person to make the 3D model of it. I can literally just make the 3D model, boom, print the thing, and like test things out and test ideas out really quickly.
Sounds like
So
you're very excited
I am
and
very excited.
very how do you say in your slang? Hyped up.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like it. And it must be really hard, actually, on a personal level, to be navigating this period where there's so much attention and also so much, I mean, like Time Magazine, and so much also financial questions, like things, the, the collapse of certain cryptocurrencies after
Sure.
Elon Musk did things. So it must be a little, I guess, worrisome because this idea that art is legitimizing this kind of very high market in
Sure.
numbers gives you a responsibility. Well, first, I would like to know if you have any questions for me because it's so impolite that I call you and then I just out there with so many questions. So I felt this time before I start, I should ask you that. I mean, you may have
I think
something
if
you
I
want to
came
know.
there, I would actually have a lot of questions, but I can't really think of any right
Okay, okay. Well, I still would like you to come. I mean,
I
I
would
very much,
definitely like to come.
yeah,
We'll definitely make that happen. I love Italy. I will definitely come.
yeah. It
And
became
so
a,
these are like videos or things online just for like people to view.
yeah, but they're videos that were not made to be ever in the space, because many
I see.
videos, for example, Henri Sala builds really complex video installations with very large screens. I think I described his work to you the other time. He just comes to my mind because um, he does video but and sound, but it really has to do with the physical space. So, for example, he made a Pandora with Pandora. He made like a virtual reconstruction of the museum in his studio in Berlin, and then he created a way so that the videos he made would move on the screen in the
Hmm.
space. So you could either stand still and the films would go by you, and then there would be pauses like silence, and then other films would come, or you could walk with the film through
Hmm.
the space to be in sync with its progression.
That's
So
interesting.
that was a very complex, kind of sophisticated installation. But as you rightly pointed out, the beginning of all this was with Namjoon Paik, whom I met before he died. But Namjoon Paik was coming out of something similar. It's interesting that you mention him because his impulse was a democratic impulse. He comes out of something called Fluxus, a Fluxus movement. Yoko Ono, you know, John Lennon's wife, she was also part of Fluxus. And Fluxus was against high art, what you call the traditional art or fine art, and wanted to be like break that.
How do you spell that? Fluxus?
Fluxus, Fluxus, Fluxus. I guess I am doing those lessons for you,
There it
actually.
is. I tricked you. I tricked you.
But I would like to learn also. So we'll get to that, I guess, because I really don't want to miss again. I felt like I missed completely asking you about the actual images, which is
Okay.
very important to me. But anyway, Fluxus was a movement that developed in the late 50s and 60s, and it was a radical democratic against fine arts, high art movement that
Hmm.
believed in the breaking down of the boundaries between real life and art. And so television existed. And so he wanted to, he's the first one who brought the television, even as an object, not just the video recorded. Namjoon Paik was very connected with the sculptural aspect of the TV set.
Yeah,
And then doing things like putting a candle, you know, emptying the TV set and putting a lit candle in a piece that he did
that's cool.
homage to Buddha. But
That's
anyway,
sweet.
um, I say that it's interesting you mention him because one of my questions was about um, how you think, because I've been trying to think what's going on, you know, with this art.
You and me both. You and me both.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think. So I'm starting to think now. This again, it might upset you, but it might not because
It
it might.
probably won't.
Anyway, I think that if you think about the 1930s and 1940s, it was a moment of um, fascist governments in Europe, communist governments in Russia, and it was Roosevelt and New Deal governments in the U.S. after the crisis. What they all had in common was they hated fine arts. And they really liked popular culture, and they wanted to be populist. To what the Russians called it socialist realism. It was figurative, and you had to represent the workers, you know, the workers in the factories. And in Italy and in Germany, it was called fascist realism. And in the US, it was just called realism. So you
Hmm.
have these big, you know, in Detroit, these big frescoes made by the Mexican muralists like Diego Rivera and all these, you know, showing the workers and all this stuff and lots of people. So all of this art across the board went against intellectual high art, Marcel Duchamp or the Surrealists or the Picasso, the Cubists. Somehow there was a moment, and I think it has to do with the crisis of 1929. There was so much poverty and so many problems that suddenly they made very authoritarian kind of governments and investments into supporting artists, and artists had to do public art. So I have a feeling that this rise of the interest towards your work, but also others, falls into this, or art on the internet falls into this kind of new era of a sort of popular culture going against high. I know that, in fact, you agree and disagree, but I'm just going to finish the argument and then you can answer. So on the one hand, there's this attitude, I've been reading all these comments to your images.
On my stuff, I don't even read the comments.
Yeah, I know, but they're there and they're part of the system. I mean, if you didn't have anyone to release these to, it would somehow, the whole structure of the everydays would somehow collapse. I mean, I think it's not that you would do them just on your own and put them away, but you have to prove to someone that you're actually doing them. You put them out in the world.
So, I agree with that.
But just to finish this, I think that there's this public space called the internet, public space, like there's the public streets. And the other fashionable thing that's happening in the public space of the streets is let's call it the Banksy phenomenon. And all of these big giant wall paintings that, city officials can buy and commission, they come after the tattoos on the body. There's these big paintings on the buildings. So I have a feeling that somehow these two things, the public space in the urban environment and the public space on the internet, have ushered in a kind of intolerance for high art and a wish to make it kind of socialist realism or realism of today. And if that's the case, then how do we understand? In fact, it wouldn't have made any sense for Picasso to be painting Cubist paintings in the 1930s. It doesn't make any sense. But it's a period that then goes right before a huge development in art, which is abstract expressionism and all that just happens right after World War II. So it could be a moment of like populism, 5-10 years before something that then develops in let's call it culture, high art, whatever you want to call it, but that's no longer the high art of before, into which you might be going because of your curiosity towards us.
Maybe. I don't necessarily think that, maybe I'll just speak for myself, but I would say graffiti too. I don't think it's necessarily against high art. It's just like, I personally feel like a lot of high art, I guess one, I will caveat this with, I didn't understand it at all. And I just like, it was just so, it's got a high barrier to entry. Let's say that. It's got a high barrier to entry because you have to sort of know a lot of stuff, a lot of history, and you have to understand why people did stuff. Because if you just look at it and it's just some fucking scribble on a wall, you're just, the fuck is that? You just look, it takes a lot of context. There's a lot of crap you have to like understand. It's not sometimes super visceral and super sort of immediate. And I think people have no attention span. And so it's sort of like, they want things that are very surface and very immediate. And okay, what's the next thing? Show me the thing. Okay, got that, the next thing. And so I think that's why, that's part of it. I think people look at it and it's gotten so sort of dense with, I don't know, a lack of a better term, intellectualism. I don't even know, like, it's gotten so dense with like itself in a way that it's sort of like, it's not even for like the average person anymore. Like, and that's how I think most people view it, that it's like, they look at this shit and it's like the emperor's,
New
no
clothes.
new
Is that
clothes where it's like the fucking banana on the wall. It's like kind of like, and I look at the banana on the wall. It's like, okay, I have a very insanely broad definition of art. So it's sort of like, okay, whatever, it's art. Sure, that's fine. Like it doesn't piss me off. It's not like whatever. It's like, whatever, that's fine. But a lot of people are like, what the fuck is this? This is just a bunch of jerk off fucking
yeah,
idiots
but that's what
talking
they
to
thought.
themselves. That's it. And it
I
doesn't
know,
matter.
I know, but the thing is that that's what they thought in the 30s too. I mean, when Adolf Hitler
I
said
think
it
you
was,
might be right. I mean, to be quite honest, I think you might be right.
you know, they thought that avant-garde art of the early 20th century was incomprehensible. You needed too much context. All of those things you say, but
Probably. I think you're probably right. I think it's
I don't
definitely,
know. I mean, maybe I'm not right, but there's. I think always that there are different
it's an
levels.
interesting theory.
Well, I think there's different levels on which you can see art. I mean, even your art, I'm trying to figure it out and figure out where how it fits into my history of art, let's say.
Sure.
So, but there are many levels. There's something visceral in looking at a Jackson Pollock too. You know, it's like a dripping painting. Oh
Yeah.
my God, it's visceral. But unless you understand it in the context, yeah, well, like you said, of the Second World War, maybe the atomic bomb and the pulverization, the atomization of life into nothing, and then you see those, you know, skies made by Jackson Pollock with dripping, then you appreciate it more. So probably, if I were to understand how your work relates to this whole digital revolution, how it's somehow using it, but also commenting on it by trying to understand it. If I could figure that out, then there would be another level, you know, other than the visceral of I like that image or I don't like that image.
Yes. I
Uh,
agree. I agree. I think that is a good point, and I think it's definitely something to sort of like think about. I think the difference between now and then is everybody's seen the Jackson Pollock thing. And so it's one of these things where everybody sort of has like on some level internalized that anything can be art, that you just
yeah,
like splash something on the painting. And so i think it's I think it's kind of like there's a sense of like when anything is art, then it's sort of like, well, nothing is art. It goes back to just sort of like, do I like this or not? I don't know. It's one of these things where I don't know. That's an interesting theory. I don't know.
yeah. Well, I don't know either. So, how about I ask you about your trip to Freeze, and what did that tell you? I mean, your trip to New York and to Freeze.
It was super interesting. I loved it. I thought it was just super fascinating. And I think I mean, I guess I'll speak for myself with like, these sort of populists or this or that. Honestly, I think it comes down to just like on some levels, just sort of, I just wasn't interested in that world. It was just like, just as much as like what I do was just like no part of what you sort of like thought about. It was just like, that's exactly how it was for me. It was just like, that's their thing. I never heard of Freeze before. Like, this is just like, I don't even know about this shit. I don't think about it. It's just like the work that I'm doing is not, nobody's looking at it in that context, including me. And so it's just kind of happening outside of the fine art world. And so I'm just giving it no thought. I don't know any of these artists.
Yeah, but now what
But
you
now
do?
it's like super interesting. Now it's like, oh wow, these are like I could spend hours. And like when I went to Hawaii a couple weeks ago too. Went to the art museum there, and it was like just super, super interesting. Like I could spend hours, like, sort of like looking at that stuff and sort of like, kind of
Sorry.
thinking about it, because it's just opened up so many sort of like new ways of me looking at like what I'm doing and analyzing like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, like even me, I'm kind of like, wait, what the hell am I doing?
Well,
Whereas
that's a
before
good
I didn't really
question.
think about it. Like I was just like, whatever, I'm doing it. I don't really give a shit. I'm just doing it. Like who cares? I
But
never gave it any thought.
was there anything that really struck you that you thought was interesting, or something that you thought was horrible and really Emperor's New Clothes?
Um, I think the difference is now. So the difference before is I would very easily say a lot of the stuff was stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't just assume it's stupid. I just assume maybe I don't know enough about it. And maybe there's something I'm missing, and that this is actually has a lot of thought, and it's not stupid. I just don't understand it. Whereas before, to be quite honest, I think an immature attitude that it was like, I understand that, it's fucking stupid. Like, I feel like I can judge it. And now I think I know enough to know that I don't fucking know. And so now I'm kind of, I don't just like dismiss it as stupid. I just think, that's interesting. I probably just don't understand it. Mm-hmm. Instead of just being like, of course I understand it, and it's stupid and it sucks.
Yeah. Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it was just a very immature, to be quite honest, sort of like attitude before.
But I mean, we have that attitude too.
I think the fine art world absolutely does have that attitude. They if they know something, if they see something they don't understand, they're just like, they're even quicker to be like, that's not art.
Yeah.
No, that's not it. And it's like, okay, well, you didn't even really think about it for a second there. You kind of just dismiss it pretty quick. So yeah, I think both sides do kind of have that attitude, that it's sort of very like, and when I see people looking at my pictures and being like, this took 2 seconds to make, or it has no message, and it's like, okay, come on, you didn't even look at it that close. Like, I'm hiding little shit in it that it's like you're not even seeing. So you acting like it's like this has no message or something. It's like, come on. And it's like, you know, with the people being like, I looked through all the pictures in a day. I spent a full day looking at it. It's like you looked at 5,000 pictures in one day and decided you understand what it is and what it means. Shut the fuck up. That's just the most lazy bullshit thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, of course. But let's maybe look at, can we look at some of your pictures?
Sure. Do you want me to pull them up?
Well,
or if you want to pull them up, you can.
I mean, I just made you a little small, and I have your Instagram up in another window. But anyway, just some hours ago, you came out with this
pizza.
Yeah, the pepperoni power structure. And there was this funny artist statement that you put, which seems like you're making fun of the art world.
Maybe a little.
I mean, it looks like you're trying to make fun of those artists who put out the statement to show that they have all this.
Well, sometimes the statements are like, come on, is this the art or is it the fucking statement? Like, it's like sometimes it's sort of like, and that's where I go back to some of the art when it's so conceptual and there's no, like, in my opinion, almost no craft, then it's kind of like, okay, like that's too conceptual for me. Like, I need some craft. I need something where it's like, truly, my kids couldn't do that. Like, it's got to have that. Me personally, that's just me personally. I need to see some level of craft. And so when I see some shit that's just entirely message and it's entirely like trying, I think sometimes too, it's trying to talk over your head. And it's like, are you trying to make this as easy as possible for everybody to understand? Or are you purposely trying to make this complicated to keep people out?
Right.
And that's the thing that I think sometimes.
You know, one of the reasons I don't like art fairs is because most of the art is very bad. I mean, it's very, it hurts me, you know. I suffer to have to actually see so much bad art and move and move and move. So it's not like all art in the art world is good art. And one of the many ways that one of the problems in the American art world is that the schools, that they're academic. People go to schools, art schools, and the art school says you have to have an artist statement, and they teach them how to do a studio visit, you know. So it's a bit academic, and I agree with you. So I was right to think that you're doing that. But I wonder if you're, now, one of the things about that image of Mr. West, I believe.
Do you know the full story of why I did that?
No, nothing.
Oh, okay. So I was on a club, you know what Clubhouse is?
Yes.
Yeah, so yes. I was on a Clubhouse with a guy. I sort of followed his work for 20 years. We never talked before. And so this was at like 9 o'clock at night. We talked and he's like, oh, did you do your picture? And I said, no, I haven't started my picture yet. I've got to finish it by midnight. So I had like 2.5 hours to finish. And I'm like, what should I do? You tell me. You tell me what to do. And he's like, oh, what am I? And he's like, pizza, something with like pepperoni pizza and like celebrities. And it was just like, okay, dude, that's the worst direction I've ever heard. And
But that
so
was last night.
that was last night. So he said that. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to do something with pizza and celebrities.
So
and so that's why I did that.
Okay, that's the, let's say, efficient cause, what they say, what you call the efficient cause. It looks like you used some of the pictures that you had used in a February image of a year ago, where you had the audience, some of the members of the audience. Let me get the date of that. It was February 17 or something, where you did the Maurizio Cattelan.
Oh yeah, that was this year. I think that was this year.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So there's a lot of like people that you'll see throughout the things where it's kind of like there's a lot of things that I purposely use over and over and over, the exact same thing, the exact same 3D object. And so it wasn't that I used the same sort of like photos, it's that I have 3D models that I keep using over and over and over, the exact same ones. The other thing you'll notice, the birds, I always use literally the exact same birds are in hundreds of pictures. And it's very purposeful because it's sort of like, I just want birds. And it's one of those things where it's almost like my sort of like signature sort of like way of sort of like.
So, yeah, but here, there are some images that are the same, like the girl with the long hair and the guy with his
hands. I can show you why. So in the scene, you can see my screen.
Yes, let me make it bigger. I mean, I made it small, so I'll make it bigger. Yeah, I see.
So in this screen, this is kind of like how I work. And so in this, put you down here. So in this, I have all of these different objects that I can pull in very quickly to sort of like compose these scenes. And so in that, I have this group of people. And so here's these people, and these people have been in many, many different things. And it's always like these people. And I've got a bunch of people.
Just I interrupt you a second. You made these people, or you bought
somebody
them
else? These are real people that were scanned in 3D. And so these are like assets you can buy. Right. And so anybody can buy these, and they're mostly used for like architectural visualization. Okay. So if you want to build a $10 million building, you know, what is it going to look like before then? You use these people to show what it's going to look like. So there's certain people in here I like this one I don't use that much. This one I don't, and you know, it wouldn't really fit. And so there's certain ones of these like, and I can really sort of like quickly kind of like put down a sort of like ground. And then this sort of like shows this kind of shows over here, the final image, what it will look like. So I can take these and I can take these people and sort of make a crowd from them, sort of scatter them on the ground very quickly and in all different ways.
Are they bought from the same company or from many different places?
In this case, I'm pretty sure this company, because I became very popular, like people just give me stuff now. And so this company was just like, here, can you use our things? And I was like, okay. And so they just gave me these, I'm pretty sure. And this was years ago. I don't even remember where they came from, to be quite honest.
Okay.
And so here's like, you know, I can very quickly make a giant crowd of these people by sort of like duplicating them.
Right.
And so I can also sort of like, okay, I don't want this one, or I want them to sort of like, you know, be more like a crowd. I can make them all different sizes. Now you see like tiny people in with like big people, and do all different sort of like things with this crowd. And so now you can kind of make it look like this, or you can make it look like there's a bunch of them sort of like clustered together, but in groups.
She moved her legs. Excuse me, the lady with the white shirt that you see from behind, that's in the picture of yesterday, her legs were in a different position.
Oh, maybe it was just swapped.
Oh.
That could be. But yeah, that's why. So you'll see that in like a bunch of different pictures. There's a bunch of different sort of like models that I've used in all different sort of like contexts, that it's the same model. Obviously, like this Buzz Lightyear thing, I've used this like model of Buzz, and these guys, these like guards, I've used these guards in like
Okay, but let
tons
me
and
ask
tons
the
of things.
question anyway. When you do this image of Buzz Lightyear with those people in front of it, and many of them are the same as yesterday's image, why do you choose those and not others, or the floor is different, or I mean, is there any
Why do I
context?
choose to use the same thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very similar in this celebrity picture of yesterday. It's not very similar to almost anything in the 5,000, even though the figures might come back in many, many
Mhm.
occasions. But there aren't that many museum displays, let's say, where there's
No,
a
there's not that many museum displays. There's definitely not that many. There's a few. There's kind of there's this one. This
no,
is
but with the label on the wall.
oh, with the label on the wall. Yeah, honestly, I think there's only those two.
Exactly. Okay,
Yeah, I
so
don't think there's I don't think there's any more than that.
Here I am comparing those images.
Because to be quite honest, I say so if I put out 3 paintings a year, and that's another thing that I think is very different with my work than other people's. I think there's so much work that I'm putting out, and I'm saying so much. I'm literally putting out 365 at least pieces of work per year that I say so much shit. It's honestly kind of like Donald Trump, where he would just say so much dumb shit that it was very hard to focus on one thing, because it's like by the time you write that article about, oh, Beeple said this, blah blah, I've already done 3 more things that could be equally as crazy. And so
That's
it's one of these
interesting.
things where it's like it'll just get lost in the noise of like, and I think that the sort of downside of that is people look at everything I'm saying and there's so much shit. Like, look how much we just discussed 1 hour or a half hour or whatever of this one image. Most people, like in the traditional art world, just like, yeah, it's stupid, pizza face, okay, done, next. Like, they're just like, there's no meaning to that. It's just random shit done next. You know what I
No,
mean?
no, but I
And
have one
so
question.
it's like an onslaught of ideas that it's very hard. Like your brain
Well,
just shuts
let's
down because
see.
it's so much shit.
Okay, but let's see how the art world reacts to this. But let's see.
I
But
hope you're
maybe you're right.
wrong.
Yeah, well, I hope I'm wrong too, to be honest, because I kind of felt a sort of motherly impulse when I saw this. I said, "Oh shit." But anyway, um, anyway, to go back to this image, the scale of the body of people
Yep.
and the scale of the face is very much the scale of what I was talking to you about in terms of wall paintings in the urban environment. So, how do you, what does this mean? I mean, these passive viewers, and sometimes I think that the audience has disappeared, that we're all producing things like what you just said. We're producing so much that we've become what they call prosumers, and and there isn't actually any audience left. I mean, anyone to actually look at a picture. It's as if the subject, the individual singular subject, had somehow been evacuated. And when you were showing me these, how you were putting these figures, they're like chess pawns that you're just putting chess pawns, almost as if they don't exist actually. And so these two questions I wanted to ask: do you think there is an audience, and why should there be one? Or is this enormous multiplication actually a kind of evacuation of the audience? And secondly, the scale with the image, the figurative image, which also reminds me of the 30s, the monumentalism of the 30s.
Um, I think the scale I did, just because that's sort of like when you sort of go into a museum, and I think you see sort of a lot of modern art, it seems like it is at a scale like this, at least to me. A lot of the sort of like big, spectacly Jeff Koons type shit is at like a semi room size scale like this. Um, Partially, it is at that scale because I wanted, as a very sort of practical manner, is I wanted to show people looking at a big, very easy to see. I wanted you to immediately be able to see that it was Kanye West. And so I'm very clearly like, when you say the audience has sort of faded away, I don't I'm very much thinking about the audience when I make this work. And so the reason I made that head so big is because you're looking at on a really small screen. You're going to look at it for about 2 seconds. I know most people are going to look at this picture for 2 seconds.
Okay.
And so I'm very much wanting to, like, I know you're going to take 2 seconds to look at it. So I want to make the face really big so that immediately you see it's Kanye West. But I also want you to see that there's people looking at it and it's like in a gallery. And so for me to make it so that you immediately see it's Kanye West, I need to make the face really big. But if I put it just as big as the people, they would be blocking the face and you literally wouldn't be able to see it. So a lot of times I'm thinking about how fast people are sort of looking at these things and how little time they're going to put into thinking about it. And so I'm trying to make it as visceral as possible so that you can instantly get some message from it.
But when you go out in the street, you're in Charleston, right? Charleston. Do they have that fashion of these big, huge wall paintings that you can make for like $39 per square meter? The artist comes, and there's all these really famous artists that do it. They make these.
I wish that'd be sweet. There's very little like graffiti or like wall paintings or anything.
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
not called graffiti anymore. It's called something else.
Street art.
Street art. Yeah, that's what it's called, street art. But
So
now,
that's why I just went to a big conference in Hawaii of street art.
Right, because it's this big thing in popular culture, and politicians like it because they can order it, and it can. And I think it has something to do with our fear of not doing things that are craft in the digital age. And so the fact that you think that a real person painted this big thing by hand, it gives it some sort of value. I mean, it's that craft question that you brought in before.
Actually, I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about. Are you talking about like a billboard?
No, it's these big wall paintings in the street. If you Google street art, you'll get tons of artists that can. They sell their they're like stars. Like there's a Beeple of street art. Maybe it's a whole other art world that you need. You're gonna find out about.
You're talking about like
Yeah.
just big sort of like corporate paintings like this.
Well, there's very little that I like this one.
Like
Here,
this?
where you see the big face. I tried to touch your screen. I can't touch your screen. In the third
Yes?
row. What? Wait a minute. I've made you very small. This is a catastrophe. Just a minute. Gee. Okay, I made it bigger again. If you go to the third row, fourth row. Well, also the second row. You see these big faces, like the painting of the Joker film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're all over the world. These things. They're like exponentially growing all over the planet in big cities. And they have their own stars, and they travel around the world and do these things. And it's very commercial. You can order them, and they cost $29, $28, $39 per
Oh, I didn't know that.
foot or square meter. Yeah, it's a big thing happening. Well, I didn't know either before I started thinking about the public space in relation to you and the public space. So it just, because of this scale issue, when you're walking in the street and you see these big heads or big bodies, it's the same kind of scale that you're reproducing in yours in small. So I sometimes think it's because people are used to seeing on the screen, and so it's like an extension of that taste.
I think it's an extension of the acknowledgement of that attention span. That it's sort of like you need to make an impression very quickly because people aren't going to look at it for very long. Right. And so that's what I think it's different. And that's where I think the fine art world, if you get their attention, and this is just from my perspective, if you get their attention, then they'll spend an hour looking at one picture. But if you don't have their attention, then they're just going to dismiss it like everybody else. They're just going to, that's nothing. I'm not even looking.
Well, that's because our life, we don't have that much life. How about you?
It's necessary because there's so much shit coming at you. Like there's so much shit coming at you all day.
Yes,
So I
yes.
think it's necessary to sort of like, and that's where I think my art is very influenced by social media. And I very much recognize that people's attention spans are very shortened and that I need to get my message in very quickly, because otherwise people are not going to get it. So it needs to be something you can glance at and immediately sort of get a big message. So in that way, I would say it is very much a reaction to sort of the times that we live in and the sort of technological things, because I am very purposeful. And that's why, again, I have a shitload of followers more followers than anybody else in the sort of digital art space, is because I recognize that. And other people do things and they don't recognize the role that sort of social media plays, and they don't recognize that people have very low attention spans. So they'll make works and it's like, yeah, that works, like nobody's gonna see it.
Yes, I understand. Okay, now one thing that you're doing is turning the object.
I'm turning the camera.
You're turning the object, the head is being turned somehow by some camera, right?
Yep. So yeah. So if you look at this, it's kind of like this is see this here. This is the sort of like virtual camera that shows the final thing. So here, let me make this a little smaller. I think you'll be able to see it.
Okay.
So
well, this is interesting because you're ending up with a photograph, with a flat image.
Yes.
But your technique is sculptural.
Yes, exactly. And so every day I'm working in a 3D environment, and then it gets flattened down to a 2D image, 100%. And so,
well, that's like Picasso in a way. I mean, strangely enough, I mean, when Cubism was invented, it was because they understood that in our brains we would put together all these images, and it would be like a synthesis. If I look at a cup, or I look at an object, like you look at your Beeple or whatever on the sofa, you only see it frontally. But in your brain, you're processing all the memories you have of having seen it from the side, from behind, from above. So your brain kind of combines it. And what Picasso was trying to show was this a way in which our knowledge of an object in the world is actually a synthesis of all these different camera shots of the object. And so a small child might not know that a glass is round on the front and also on the back, but having seen it many times, they'll then
you don't need to show that. You know that you can just use a simpler like form of it, and then people still will fill in the rest themselves.
Yeah, but that question that is the reason why Picasso's important is the decomposition of an object, not representing it figuratively, but representing what your brain has had. So all these different facets of the object is like what your brain had as shots.
Yep.
To then put it together. And
that's
the fact that well, that's the essence of Cubism. The fact that actually, I have to plug this in. The essence of our time is also energy. Just 1 second.
Yeah.
Real problem. I just realized that the plug was looking at me and the battery was very low. No, so, and the fact that happened at that time, that's what I mean by trying to understand an artist in the context of the history, social history, economic, technological. I mean, it happened at the same time as Einstein is developing relativity. So, the idea that there's no objective real world out there, but it's all in relation. Time and space are connected, and it's all a question of relations, was all happening at the same time in those years. So anyway,
that's interesting.
I don't know where I was going with that, but back to you. I mean, what I understand, which for you is banal, but for me was not, is that you make two-dimensional images, but your technique is sculptural.
Absolutely, 100%.
That's weird.
Yeah. It's almost, I don't even think it's it's sculptural in a way at times, but it's also almost like this is kind of like how I sort of like make something. It starts out like just an empty void like this. And so what I used to do is sort of like take a cube and like I could make this cube into sort of like whatever shape I want. And so I could say, okay, I want, now there's 4 sort of faces on the cube. Now I want to make it like this. And now I can take this and very sort of like make this into any shape that I want by doing all these different things. And so I can sort of take this face and we can pull it out, and then we can pull a thing here. And then, now it's this shape. And so also with this shape, I can light this shape any way I want, and I can make it any material I want. So now I can say, okay, I want to make it a shiny material like this. And so now I apply this material and I can make this color, any color I want. And so now I can make it like this. I can make it so that it's super shiny. I can make it so that it's kind of, it's hard to see because there's no sort of ground or sky or anything. So now I can put a ground down. Now it looks like it's sitting on this. Could put some, now it looks like it's sitting in the like daylight, and I could change these lights and put them however I want. And so now, yeah, this is very sculptural. And so this is kind of how I worked before, making things like years ago that were very sort of, I would make different shapes and they would be, I would do all different things to make them. And so now here's one, and I can also say, okay, I want to have, a bunch of these shapes. And now I've got a bunch of them. I could say, instead of them in a grid like this, I can make them in like a sort of radial sort of pattern, and kind of make these sort of, whatever I want, and make sort of like abstract things like this.
But okay, just for a second, when you're making your everydays, you start just fooling around and messing around like intuitively?
No, not now. And this is how I used to make things like 5-6 years ago. It's sort of like this. In that case, I would usually kind of just start messing around. I would just start and it'd be like, okay, does this shape look cool? No. Okay, well, what if we change this? What if we kind of, do this? What if we make, this shiny? What if we sort of change the light to be over here? And it was just like gassing to like, until I got something that felt like it was cool. And it was just like, oh, does this look interesting? Like, is this okay? Well, what if we made another one of these? And you can kind of infinitely sort of like.
Let me ask you another question. Do you ever write your own software, or do you only buy products?
Only buy products. Tools. I have no sort of like interest in writing, and these programs are very complicated. Like this program is like $3,000 or $4,000 to like buy it outright. It's very, very complicated. There's huge pieces of this program I don't understand at all, like huge pieces.
What's the name of this program you're talking
Cinema
about?
4D.
Ah, yeah.
So there's probably about 3 of these programs that are very, very popular for sort of like 3D. This is not the one that's used in like movies. That one's called Maya. Maya or Houdini. And there's ones even more complicated. Houdini is the most complicated. Houdini is like insanely complicated. And so like just these things that I'm doing in a few clicks would take way more time, but you can do anything. And so this one is sort of a good mix of like speed and sort of like, it can do a lot. It can do more than I need, but it can do it very fast. And so I can iterate through ideas very, very quickly.
But you'd like to learn Houdini, for example?
Not really, because again, I want to move through ideas very quickly. I don't want to move. I don't need it to be like pixel perfect. I don't need to sort of like, because if I can't think of how to do it, I'll just do something different. I don't really want to like spend 3 days trying to figure out how to do exactly the thing I want. I'll just do something different. It's just not that interesting to me.
Sorry, I know that it's very late, and I think you might have other things to do.
I'm good. I've got some more time. It's up to you.
Well, okay. Well, no, something that has nothing to do with all of this, but I was thinking about games and children and playing, because partly, what you're doing is like a young boy kind of playing with the computer.
Yes. So that is actually, so here, let me just super quick sort of go. This is how I used to work. Now how I work is I have this thing, and it's exactly what you said. That is actually the analogy I work. It's like a kid with toys. And so now, instead of sort of working from tiny shapes and sort of building everything from scratch, I have this big library of 3D toys, basically 3D models that I can put in immediately. And so now here's a guy with like, a Nazi holding a rifle, and I can just put him into the scene in 2 clicks. And now this becomes the paintbrush. Now it's like, okay, well, what can I do with this guy? What if I put a bunch of them? What if I put one of them really big? Like, what if I put them and they're sort of like And I've got all different things, all different types of characters, all different types of, you know, here's the cartoon things, here's a, you know, a bunch of different animals, and all of these things too can be sort of like manipulated in all different ways. So this pig here, if you look closely, you can see there's like bones. And so I can take and sort of like, it's called a rig, and I can sort of move the pig in any way that I want. And I can move it in like crazy ways too, that it's like, okay, well, here's a really long pig. I can do like anything, like unlimited possibilities of like how I can sort of manipulate people.
But you're limited by the figures that are.
There's unlimited amounts of figures. So here we go. So if I don't have a figure, then I can go to this site, and there's a bunch of sites that sell these things, and it's like, name a thing.
Name a thing? An oyster.
Here's a shitload of oysters. What oyster do you want? And so again, I can buy one of these things.
I want the oyster in the middle on the 1, 2, 3, 4th row. Looks a little like a
one.
4th row down. One more. Down.
This one.
The one, yeah, that one. That reminds me of the oyster where Botticelli has the Venus coming out.
So I can, right here, $39.
Well, you don't
now
have to
I
buy
can
it.
use
Don't
this
buy
oyster and whatever. But it's I could show you how quickly it is that it's like, okay, boom, download it, put it into in about 2 minutes, I could have an oyster in this scene.
Okay, but who is the person putting that oyster on sale? I mean,
there's tons of people.
But it's
tons
like
of
a
people.
photograph?
What's up?
Is it a photograph or a painting?
It could be. Some of them are sort of like made from taking a bunch of photographs and stitching them together into a 3D model. That's called photogrammetry. Some things, and in the future, photogrammetry is going to be a lot better, and you'll be able to do it very quickly. Right now, it's kind of a pain in the ass. It's doable, but in the next probably 3 years, the cameras are on the phones are going to be good enough that it'll be very good, and you'll be able to like grab any object, you know, immediately and sort of like, okay, I want a 3D model of this. You'll put it down. You'll just move your phone around it, and it'll make a 3D model. You can do that now. It's a big pain in the ass. I can also buy it like cleaned up and a nice 3D model very quick.
Right. But do you think that because of the availability of all these images of objects and things, that's why there's figuration so much in your work?
Yeah, 100%. Yes. And so sort of like before this, I wanted to learn how to make everything myself. And so it was like, okay, if I want, you know, a person, like just making this model of this person or this pig would take you days. Like it's not like, oh, it'll take an hour. It's like, no, it's going to take you days.
When
like,
did you start? When did you start?
When I started kind of doing it. If you look through the everydays, I started sort of like tiptoeing into that before I hit 10 years. And so if you look at, these are the things right before 10 years, mainly I started using trees and some people. But then when I hit 10 years, which was right here, this was the 10 years, I immediately, then it was like, okay, now there's no sort of like limits. I'm literally like, I will use anything. There's no, if I want something, then I'm just going to use it. And so that was like a very clear thing. And then I started using, you know, more models of just anything. Like before, I wouldn't even use like a car or something like that. Now I use cars, tanks, buildings, like anything I wanted. So it's like a scene like this with the whole city, I can make it very quickly. And so the work sort of like immediately changed then, because now it's like, oh, I want elephants with rockets on them. How the fuck am I going to make an elephant? It'll take 3 weeks.
Well,
now I just get an elephant.
Yeah.
What's up?
Now, no, there's your guy with the gun.
Yep. So you can see this is like yeah, here's the guy right there in the gun. And in this context, you know, it has different meaning than in this thing. And so, yeah, that guy has been, and so that's where I look at it as like, that's kind of the thing that makes my style unique, is I have these certain people that are in a bunch of different things, almost like you would see, you know, Basquiat used a bunch of crowns, or, you know, this or this person used this or that theme. So it's these models, I'm very intentionally using the same model over and over and over and over and over and over and over.
That's
so that when you look at something, you can immediately be like, okay, that's a Beeple.
Okay, I understand. Sorry, I'm just ignoring that. I'm looking at your Instagram, but there's so many things. So you told me one inspiration for last night's was this conversation on Clubhouse. And what about the one before, for example, this kind of worm caterpillar?
Oh, because Eric Carle, do you know who that is?
No?
Okay, so Eric Carle wrote this book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
Okay.
And so it's funny you don't know that because it's very, very popular, like in the United States. And my wife was a third grade, or was like a school teacher. And so this was sort of like one of her favorite books, was this Very Hungry Caterpillar. And it's like a kid's book that sort of shows this caterpillar eating through a bunch of stuff. And he wrote this like 50, 60 years ago, and he just died the day before. And so my sort of homage to him, he's like 90 or whatever. My homage to him was this very, very, very hungry caterpillar. Instead of he's eating food, he's eating people. So that's why I did that, because that day he died.
The day before this
the day before
in the mud.
This was very quick. It was just like, I gotta fucking get something out. It was just sort of this was one where I started from nothing, and it was just like, okay, throw this in, throw this in, throw this in, throw this in. And I had a different idea, and then I ran out of time, and it was like, okay, this one was sort of, there's not a huge lot of deep.
Okay. And the one before, this kind of mushrooms or whatever you want to call them?
This one was sort of like thinking about, just like, some of them are just sort of like thinking about different scenes, and sort of like, this one was actually, I talked to a guy that day who sort of like invested in a bunch of like psilocybin and sort of like mushroom, like psychedelics for, like, I don't know if you've heard, like, you could use like ayahuasca and psychedelics for therapy. Yeah. And so this was sort of like, kind of inspired by our conversation that I talked to him like a bunch that day.
So there seems to be daily life coming in here. And the one
100%. Absolutely. There's a ton. And it's funny, actually, this van, and I didn't realize this till afterwards. So we moved into a new space, and I have a friend who is like kind of staying with us, and he has like a van, and he like had the van in our space, and like, we kind of needed to tell him to get the fucking van out of the space, and it looks exactly like this. And so afterwards, it's like, oh shit, that seems like it's very like psychologically, I was kind of like projecting this.
Conscious, yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy with the hole in the head and the person in the place?
So this was like another sort of thing. This was one that I kind of had been wanting to sort of like do for a long time. Like, sometimes I'll get an idea like this where it's like, it's more like just like an image that I really want to see. Like, I had sort of been thinking about like people sort of like, and it didn't turn out quite how I was thinking. It took a slightly different direction, but I was more so thinking if there were like giants that kind of like existed. Like in this instance, it's sort of like these giants existed. We trashed the planet, and like now these giants died. And so there's these like giant like bodies like sort of littering the earth, and like people are sort of like bored through them and sort of like using them for homes and using them for like different stuff. Like, we've kind of destroyed the earth, but these like this is 2,000 years in the future. Like,
right. It's a post-apocalyptic vision again.
Kind of, yeah. That we made these sort of like giant meat monster people, and sort of that didn't work, and we like trashed the planet, and like.
Is that anybody in particular?
No, it was sort of like, this was kind of the like techno king person. Like, it's sort of like, which I don't know what that means. It's sort of like, when I think of techno king, it's sort of like this person who's kind of the person who sort of like, I think I've been sort of like playing with a lot of kind of themes around like worshiping technology in a way.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like the techno king is almost this like Jesus figure that sort of like controls technology and is sort of like, the Jesus of technology. And so it's like, because I think technology is very much just like magic. It's like things that you just couldn't do before. Suddenly you can. It's like, oh, we can talk to a person on the other, like literally what we're doing. Like you have the show what we're doing, talking. You're in Italy, the other side of the world. Like you show this to somebody 200 years ago, it's literally magic. It is 100% magic to them. And so
I agree.
That's what technology is.
Yeah.
And sort of that's what the kind of like idea with the Techno King is, that he's sort of this like Jesus magic person that kind of, it's not really magic, it's just technology.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes I think that that what we call kind of telepathy or serendipity, coincidences, telepathy is just because, or magic, is just because we don't know the physics. And I sometimes say to people, when there were no cell phone, I mean, if you had a cell phone in the 1500s, they would think it was magic. Or
I think about that a lot. Like, I think how fun it would be sometimes to show somebody from then the things we have now. Like, they would literally just like, what the they would just blow their mind. And so I think about like myself in the future, like what would be like blow my mind as like a person.
Well, probably that we don't need cell phones. And I mean, we don't actually need any of that, because if one can train entanglement and understand how that works properly, you don't actually need to put chips in people's bodies. It should just work automatically. That's why those sci-fi movies seem so silly. The ones where they, put a kind of cell phone.
They're still using iPads 300 years in the future.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I often think that there's that. Well, because I was interested in theosophy. And, I think I spoke to you about Annie Besant. She was a big influence on me. She was a 19th century theosophist. And anyway, one of her books is called Thought Forms. And there are all these experiments in sending thoughts. And you have to focus on them as if they're objects and they're hovering in front of you and they have a kind of image that you have to focus on. And then you send it to someone. So I used to do all these exercises.
What do you mean send it?
I'm crazy. Yeah, send it. And then I telephone and say, did you just think about, a round shape that was kind of scary? And actually, I think I had more yeses than nos. So at that point, I started to think that we don't have any idea about the technology, which is just embedded in the fact of entanglement, because if I entangle a photon by splitting it, the two photons, they can be on the other side of the universe, but they dance together. So if you apply that to 10 people's brains, it probably would work. It just needs a lot of training. So
you might have lost me there. You might have lost me there.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I know that's where people think
it's an interesting theory, though.
Well, now, who would have thought that you could make quantum computers 20 years ago?
There's a lot of things like that. I mean, it's definitely that's a lot of things. And I think I don't see, and maybe it's just I don't know, but I think there's not a lot of people, there's not enough people, maybe I should say it that way. There's not enough people commenting and thinking about how technology is rapidly changing things. I am a perfect sort of example of that, product of that. A new technology emerged, NFTs, and then boom, I made a bunch of money. Like, it didn't happen without that technology. Like, and right. So I think there's going to be a lot of weird things like that. And that's why there's a lot of weird things in my pictures. Part of the reason there's a lot of weird things in my pictures. Because I think there's going to be a lot of weird things that happen in the future.
Yes, well, one of them that I'm going to try to plan on doing is saving certain things of the past, such as the museums. I mean, I see them endangered right now because of this incredible new wealth. And I
don't think they're endangered.
Well, I don't know. We have to make, I mean, I'm not sure about that, because there's a tendency, well, there's two different sources of the danger. One is that the governments think that we should digitalize everything and then turn them into sort of storages, because there's no authority given to the physical audiences that are so few people. So that's one risk. And the other risk is really, I think it's the financial unbalance. I mean, if a painting or an artwork sells for millions and millions, and the whole budget of a museum is maybe a fraction of that, a fraction, there could be some sort of turmoil, or how do you say terremoto, earthquakes, that, and so it's a very delicate moment. It's delicate. It has to be carefully, I mean, carefully.
That's what I thought was
Balanced.
actually interesting, to bring it back to this B20 thing, is a big part of the reason that it has changed. It changed from like patrons and everything being public into like these private collections where people own everything. But he was sort of like, this is a way that a bunch of people could own art instead of just one person owning it. And so that's a way that it could sort of democratize it. And it could be a way to kind of like make it more public again, because everybody owns it. Everybody owns a small share of it, versus just one J.D. Rockefeller owning it and putting it in his cigar lounge, and then nobody ever sees the painting again. And so he was sort of like, in the past, it used to be sort of how it sounds like it is in Europe, maybe still, where it is more public and it's more owned by everybody. But it's not like that now. And it's getting increasingly not like that. And so that's where he was sort of like, just the vague idea of kind of fractionalized ownership, it could bring it back to that.
Ownership is not the same thing as the experience of art. I mean, if you own a Shakespeare book with the play, it's not the same thing as reading the play, as that interiorization of the experience, or watching the play in a theater. So ownership does not equal experience of art. That's not right.
But you can't experience art if somebody owns it and they lock it away. There is no experience.
No. Of course.
That's what I think it's sort of, so they are kind of a little tied together. Not the same, but if you own it, you can restrict access to it.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen that much. I mean, most rich people who buy art.
How much art is sitting in crates?
Oh, a lot, but there's a lot more in museums, I think. And a lot, no, I really don't think that the free ports, if you're talking about the free ports in Switzerland and so on, and in Singapore, there's a free port. Those were made, but most wealthy collections, when the collection dies, when the person dies, they're not all sold at auction, A lot of them, the real goal is to become eternal, like the Carnegie or the Guggenheim and so on. So the entire collection of Soviet abstraction is because the Guggenheim Solomon made it public after the death. So, I mean, Cerruti was a private collection, right? And he gave it all to us. So I think that the greatest aspiration of collectors is not that it gets sold and dispersed. That happens when they don't think enough and they die and their children and heirs sell it. But when they think a lot, it becomes like the Barnes collection in Philadelphia. So you only have to wait one generation, or the Medici becomes the Uffizi Museum. I don't think historically the best art is in collections, Maybe now in contemporary art, but it's a long story. I guess it's a long story, and I don't know where I'm going. So I think that I really enjoyed talking to you again. I didn't ask all those 12 questions.
How many did you get? Did you get any of them?
Yeah, I got a few. Whenever the conversation was weird because I brought something out of the blue. There was something that I did want to ask you about that's very personal. It's your opinion on the maybe excess time that we spend on the digital. For example, when you say sit down and work, which is the opposite of what people used to say, get up and work.
Yeah.
When you had to go into the fields and pick the food or into the factory, there's something, that has to do with obesity, with health, with blood circulation in your body, so many things.
It's not good sitting.
Yeah, and children, so children growing up very screen-based. So I kind of wanted to know how you deal with that with your children, and if you just pop them in front of a screen.
No, no, no. We're definitely, I mean, we're not perfect. I'm not going to act like they've never, seen an iPad or played a video game, but we're very, very much trying, obviously recognize that it's not good. Like that doesn't seem to be like a huge debate. Like it seems pretty sort of unanimously kind of settled that sitting, not good. Getting a shitload of screen time, not good. Obviously, social media, like they're gonna be the last kids in the class to get an Instagram account. That I can assure you of, because I am acutely aware of how much of a mind fuck social media is. And I think I've been able to use it as a tool and use it, recognize the sort of pluses and minuses of it, but there's absolutely minuses, and there's absolutely minuses for me even mentally. And so I'm very acutely aware of it, and that's why I don't read the comments, because it's not healthy. I don't believe it's
Okay.
healthy.
So you use the technology as a tool for your work, for your art, but you're not like one of those people who just want to be in their garage forever and have no healthy, no sun, no swing. Well, you went to Honolulu, I guess you got
No, because that's not like anything of one thing is not like, that's not interesting or like healthy. You need like a balance of the thing. So I like computers a lot, and I spend a lot of time on computers, but I also recognize the like downsides.
Well, I think that it's very interesting that you think all of this, and so I'm happy you think all of this, because it portrays a skeptical person also. So not that I have that matters at all, what my judgment is, but I just think that. So I guess we can do one of two things. We can consider this like the second and complete conversation, and it's sort of where everything happened that we didn't know what. Or we could have another conversation.
Yeah, I would like to have another conversation. I think it's very interesting, and like I definitely get a lot out of these, and it sort of definitely makes me think of what I'm doing in a different context and I'm really excited to look up these people too. And it definitely helps me sort of process some of this stuff differently and sort of like look at these works differently. So yeah, I would love to like talk again in a little bit.
Okay. By the way, speaking about our conversations, I was wondering if that Instagram image of the Dali, with the long legs, the animals,
Yeah.
the elephants, that was done very few days after we spoke, and you saw the Catalan with the long legs. Was that in any way related? Like you saw the long legs and you thought about the Dali long
No,
legs?
it was definitely because I spent a bunch of time looking at Dolly's work and looking at those like giant like elephant things, and it was
Right.
like, oh, that is freaking
But it
sweet.
was
Yeah, it was 100% because of that.
okay. But it was a pure coincidence then that it was very few days after I showed you the Catalan.
I think it was mostly Dolly.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I was just wondering if subconsciously, because it was only like 3 days after. And so I thought, this is what I thought. Mike Winkelmann is so cultured and cultivated. He knows everything. He wanted to, how do you say, criticize Catalan, say Catalan copied Dali. That's what I thought. I really did.
I think you're giving me too much credit. You might be giving me a little too much credit.
But anyway,
I'll get there, but it's gonna take a second. It's gonna take it a second. Well, awesome.
Anyway.
Let's find another time to chat.
Yes.
But this was super awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to talk here, and like I get a lot out of these talks. So I definitely wish we could talk again.
Molto bene. Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Ciao,
Thank you.
bye. Have a nice day.
You too. Bye.